Hey ghouls and gals, welcome back to my channel. My name is Taylor and today's video is going to be a vlog where I am reading 3 mystery or thriller books. It's been a while since I did a vlog dedicated to mysteries and thrillers and I'm in the mood. I am in the mystery mood. So I figured these 3 books, they're all new releases. 2 of them were books that I was anticipating releasing, and then another one that I found at my library and thought sounded really interesting and would work really well for this vlog. So I'm gonna quickly introduce the 3 books I'm gonna be reading in this vlog, and then we're gonna get to reading. So the first one is Death Takes Me by Cristina Rivera Garza. This is translated by Robin Myers and Sarah Booker, and this is a literary thriller. This is also a book that seems to be very meta because our main character that we are following has the same name as the author. So we follow main character Cristina Rivera Garza as she stumbles upon a body late one night. And this is also going to be a critique about just the body and police proceedings. And the professor is a professor of poetry, and there is like a poetry element to the crime scene that the professor is going to try and help the police with the mystery and helping to solve the case. And this is also a social commentary because it says originally written in Spanish, where the word for victim is always feminine. Death Takes Me is a thrilling masterpiece of literary fiction that flips the traditional crime narrative of gendered violence on its head. So I'm definitely looking forward to the meta commentary with the author being the main character and what this has to say about crime and gendered violence. So this is book number 1, and then book number 2 is the one that I saw at my library, and it has such a striking cover and I was really intrigued by the title, by the cover. I picked it up and it is a thriller. It's a very fast-paced thriller, very short. It's The Night of Baba Yaga by Akira Otani, and this is translated from the Japanese by Sam Bett, and I believe this is about a main character who accidentally gets involved with the Yakuza and has to become like a getaway driver. I don't know a lot about this one, but I'm intrigued by it. It says it's a lean, mean translated thriller, so interested to read more. And then last but not least, the book that we're going to start the vlog off with is Mask of the Deer Woman by Laurie L. Dove. This is a mystery thriller about a woman who moves back to her reservation to be, I believe, the only police officer on the reservation. There's a series of disappearances. This is going to be commentary on the very real MMIW, missing or murdered Indigenous women epidemic in North America. And this also, I think, has some like paranormal elements. It's an investigator haunted by both her past and the mythical deer woman who races to bring a missing girl home before it's too late. So we are going to start the vlog off with this one. I don't typically love reading, and not love reading, but it's not typically my preference to read mysteries or thrillers where the main character is a police officer, but this one I just feel like is going to have a very different spin. We're following ex-Chicago detective Carrie Starr, who has nowhere to go but back to her roots. Starr's father never talked much about the reservation where he was raised, but the tribe needs a new marshal as much as Starr needs a place to call home. So our main character is going to be the marshal on the reservation, and there's a series of missing women, missing girls, and the latest victim potentially can still be found alive. So I'm intrigued. I'm gonna go get to reading and I will check back in later when I have an update on this one. So I am now about 10% of the way into Mask of the Deer Woman by Laurie L. Dove, and this is one I don't normally update this soon to when I started a book. However, there's some stuff that's kind of bothering me already in this book, so I don't know how my reading experience is going to be. And a big factor for why I'm already not loving this one so far is our main character, Carrie Starr. So she is an ex-Chicago detective, and she is assigned to this reservation to look into all of the missing women and girls. This is very clearly a punishment for her. She did something that we don't really know the details of just yet, but she did something that got her like on probation from the Chicago police force, and she's been sent to this reservation to kind of be out of sight, out of mind. This is a punishment for her, and she has to go through all of these cold cases. She is the only detective or any sort of law enforcement on this reservation, and Carrie has a lot of anger towards this situation. Now, when she arrives, she actually gets a call from someone who is really worried about her daughter that has gone missing, and that's actually who we are following in this prologue. So we know that this young woman, Shanoa Cloud, has gone missing. There is foul play involved, and when Carrie Starr gets this missing persons report, she's very belligerent. She's very belligerent, and even though she's there because there is an epidemic of missing Indigenous women and girls, she just treats this as a runaway, and the dealings that she has with the family are very unprofessional, very belligerent. She also has substance abuse problems, and she is using on the job, so she's a very, very unlikable main character. She is not hiding the fact that she is going through the motions, and she's constantly saying things both out loud and then in her internal monologue, things like, I'll probably have to treat this like a missing person case just so this lady leaves me alone. She keeps just really belittling everyone around her, downplaying the situation, and she's just not a very good detective so far. So I don't know, I think it's gonna be a struggle reading with this main character, and also because we, the reader, know that this is a missing persons case. We know without a doubt, based on the prologue, this is not a runaway, and Starr is doing nothing to even get involved in the case. And this is another thing that I'm hoping that we will touch upon. Again, I'm 10% of the way through this one, so not far at all, but Carrie Starr is actually Indigenous herself. Her father was a part of this reservation, and she grew up apart from this culture. So I think some of her antagonism might have to deal with the fact that she's struggling a lot with her own identity and feeling like an outsider in a place where she probably shouldn't feel like an outsider. So maybe we will address that. Maybe we will see. She's definitely dealing with a lot of trauma from what happened in Chicago, and her daughter has also died. So there's a lot going on to make Carrie Starr a character that could be very complex and dynamic, and exploring all of these traumas and how they have shaped her. I've read several books this year that have very flawed main characters, that are the way they are because of grief, but right now she's reading just very unlikable and very much like a caricature. If you're thinking of a jaded police officer, that's like the subtype that she is right now. And I know I'm very early on into this one, but I'm worried we're not going to get depth of that character, and I just feel like because we as the reader, I think we as the reader are going to find out a lot more before Carrie Starr does. I think that's going to be a little bit frustrating that we have all the answers and she doesn't. So I don't know. Wanted to read this book because it did go over the MMIW epidemic that is happening in North America at the moment, but just this seems like it's just going to be such a frustrating book. I read actually Sisters of the Lost Nation a couple of weeks ago by Nick Medina, and I really enjoyed that one, and it does kind of deal with similar themes, and I loved it. I loved it. So a horror thriller, I would recommend this one right here. I thought that it did a really good job of exploring a real world problem and then just turning it into a story with a mystery that was engaging. And while the characters were flawed, it was very readable and a very enjoyable reading experience, even though it went over very dark topics. This one, on the other hand, I'm just really worried at this point, and I don't usually give updates this soon into the bookish reading experience. I try and give it at least 20%, but the way that this main character is rubbing me really wrong. I'm really worried that that is going to really impact the way that I feel about this book, but I am still going to give it a fair shot. I'm going to read more of this, maybe try out the audiobook and see if that changes my opinion on this at all, but so far not so good. Hopefully this turns around for me. I'm gonna go get to reading and I will check back in later with the reading update. So I am now about 45% of the way through this book and I still feel the exact same way about Carrie Starr as a main character as I did in the first 10%. So that is really frustrating because I like and appreciate what this book has to say about the MMIW epidemic, and then also it's going into talks of pipeline construction on this reservation. So it's going over some important topics, and it's not like the writing style is something that I'm not getting along with, but just Carrie is just so frustrating to read from. And we do get different one-off chapters of people in the neighboring town and also the reservation, and I almost wonder if I could like this more if we had another consistent point of view other than Carrie. She's really bothering me, and I do think I said in the opening clip of this vlog that I don't normally like detective point of views, and this point of view is really nailing a lot of reasons why I don't like detective or police officer point of views. It's really frustrating, and just every single character that Carrie is interacting with, she's very belligerent and dismissive, and even when things like start happening, she's still so slow to connect the dots, whether because she doesn't want to think of herself as wrong, or I don't know, she's just a bad detective. It's really frustrating to read a book where the character is just so apathetic, and I just think this book would be a lot better served if, you know, she can be a complex character. She can be struggling with things like substance abuse and grief and loss and feeling like she doesn't belong at this reservation, which is supposed to be home for her, and I think we can have all of those things, but she doesn't care about anything. And there's been a lot of circumstances where she has very casually used and defended police brutality, so that's not fun to read, and I wish she cared. I think that would make her flawed characteristics a lot easier to handle if she was really trying to solve this case, this mystery. What I also don't like is she gets lost in thought a lot, so every single person she talks to, witnesses, coroners, anything like that, she spaces out and she goes into internal monologues like when they're talking, and then she comes back to attention when they finish up. So she's missing a lot of information. So we as the reader not only are not really liking this main character, I mean, I say we, I'm pretty sure not a lot of people are going to like Carrie as a protagonist, but not only is that the case, but she's not even a good detective, and we as the reader are several steps in front of her. If something about that were to change, I feel like I would be enjoying this more. Like maybe we do have a really flawed protagonist who doesn't believe that there's a problem going on at this reservation, that doesn't believe that these girls have been murdered or kidnapped, and just thinks that they're runaways. Well, that's fine, but if we have that protagonist who's really set in her ways, I almost don't want to see scenes that make the reader more knowledgeable than Carrie, if that makes sense, because that could be interesting, having her kind of unpack her biases and figuring out that she is wrong, and maybe us as the reader also questioning, okay, is this a runaway? Is this a missing person? And I think that would, like, I don't know, there's just something missing from here. Like, it needs more suspense, or just something other than the fact that just the main character doesn't care. So when the main character doesn't care like at all, it makes it really hard for the reader to care. I will say the audiobook has been a better experience for me. So I've either been reading it in tandem, reading this physically while listening to the audiobook, or I've been playing a lot of Animal Crossing. So a game like that, it's not really like thought intensive. It's just doing smaller tasks. There's not a lot of dialogue. So when I'm playing a game like that, I can listen and focus on an audiobook. So that's my plan for today. Play a lot of Animal Crossing, get some chores done, like laundry. I think I've got a lot of laundry to do as well. So we'll do that and then finish this book up. I'm hoping the next 50% of the book just goes differently for me. I'm hoping we get some character development from Carrie. She's very one note thus far, and the one note that she is I'm not liking, or something happens with the mystery to get our main character more involved, more engaged, and that will make the mystery more engaging to read as well. So I'm gonna go get to reading. I'll check back in later with a reading update. So I did finish Mask of the Deer Woman by Laurie L. Dove, and unfortunately this one was kind of a miss. I've already talked about at length about my dislike of our main character, and I just felt like even if she would have started out this book so unlikable and just all of the issues that I had with this character, if we would have gotten some character development, some reflection, some consequences for actions, maybe I could have liked this one a little bit more. But Star is just so one note. Carrie Star as a character, like from the beginning of this book to the end of this book, she feels like pretty much the same character. There was no character development or growth, and especially for an unlikable main character or a deeply flawed main character, you have to have just a little bit of character growth throughout the novel, for me at least, to enjoy it. But there were some things that I did like about this. The writing style I enjoyed. This book is very readable, and I think it's a testament to the fact of how strong the writing style is and how readable it is that I did finish it when at 10% I was nervous about the main character. We also get other chapters throughout this book. We're mostly following Carrie Star, of course, but we also get some chapters throughout the narrative that have different points of view, and I liked those a lot. So this author can write a good story, a good narrative with good characters. So it wasn't like a complete wash for me, I will say. I just feel like thematically there were some not necessarily plot holes, but I just feel like a lot of this, because we were following one character who just did not care, we missed out on a lot of what makes mysteries and what makes thrillers engaging books to read. I also mentioned, I think I mentioned this, but in the very beginning of this book, you as the reader know a lot of what has happened. There are still some twists and turns throughout this book, but for the most part, we know what happened to Chenoa Cloud at the beginning of this book. We know who was involved, so it's frustrating as a reader to have all of those answers, and I just feel like it took a lot of suspense out of the way because we had someone who was just not great at her job, not great at detective work. I almost feel like a lot of times in mysteries and thrillers, we have the opposite problem where we'll have this random person who's not involved in the case at all, and they get so invested in a case and investigating, and you're like, why would someone care so much? But honestly, a character like that is far preferable to what we got in here. And just the commentary in this I did like, but just the way that it was handled was so weird, because we had Carrie Star talking about the horrific statistics for missing and murdered Indigenous women women and girls and Indigenous people in general, honestly. Like, we have her talking about the statistics and the biases of law enforcement, and then you saw her unironically say the same exact things and do the same exact things throughout this whole entire book about just claiming people are runaways and taking stereotypes and using that to lead her investigation rather than pick up on, and I don't know if this is because we as the reader know more of what's going on, but there were people in here that were very suspicious, and the people that she would decide to question didn't seem suspicious at all. So yeah, and just one last final thing. This is a mystery thriller. This is a mystery thriller vlog. I wasn't expecting paranormal horror, but from the title and then also from the description on the dust jacket, you do expect the folklore, the mythological character of the dear woman to play a bigger part in this story, and she just doesn't. So unfortunately, this just was a miss for me, and I am really bummed about this one because I was really looking forward to reading this book. This is the book that I have had on my TBR for the longest since I heard that it was coming out, and just unfortunately, while the writing style was okay, it was obviously very readable because I did read this very quickly. Just the main character and the lack of character development and consequences just really frustrated me with this one. So we are done with the first book of this vlog and we are moving on to the second one. And the second book of this vlog is going to be The Night of Baba Yaga by Akira Otani. This is translated by Sam Bett, and this one is quite short as well. I mean, this one I feel like was an okay length, a typical length for a mystery thriller, about 330 pages or so. This one, I believe, is just hits the 200 page mark, and it is short, like it is like in size. It's a shorter hardback. So this one seems to be a pretty fast-paced read. I looked on Libby, the audiobook's only about 4 hours, and just looking at the interior of this book, I feel like a lot of the pages, definitely this one, it could be an easy one to fly through. So I'm going to be reading this one next. I don't know if I'm going to read it. I feel like I could honestly read it all in one go, especially if it is like a very fast-paced thriller. In this one, our main character accidentally gets kidnapped, dragged, gets like involved with the gang underground in Japan, and she has to drive around the gang leader's daughter. So I don't know, very intrigued by this one. It should be a very fast-paced time. I'm gonna go get to reading and I will check back in later with a reading update. So I was right, it's the same day, several hours later, and I have finished The Night of Baba Yaga, and I really enjoyed this one. This was very fast-paced, and it really read like an action movie. The descriptions of the action scenes, the fight scenes, it felt very visual. There were even, like, in the fight scenes, there were descriptions of the sounds happening during the fight that I can't really articulate, but it even almost felt a little bit like comics or manga or something like that, where we have the onomatopoeias of, I think that's the right word, of different sound effects, like the punches and the kicks and what they sounded like. So this is a very visual, fast-paced thriller. This author actually got her start writing in different video games, so that makes a lot of sense with a lot of how the action was described and panning out. So we are following, in this book, main character Shindo. Shindo is a fighter, a brawler. She gets into a fight on the street one night and is picked up by the Yakuza because they were impressed by her fighting skills, and the Yakuza boss needs a driver and a bodyguard for his daughter to protect her. Shoko is the daughter. She's 18 years old, and these two women are really close in age, and they have this very tumultuous relationship, obviously. because this was not a mutual agreed upon arrangement, but you can't exactly say no when the Yakuza says, do this, you're hired for us now, this is your job. So these two women have this very interesting dynamic of a driver and a bodyguard and her charge, and they really hit it off, and there's a lot of action going on that I'm gonna leave it at that. It's a very interesting dynamic between these two women, and we follow our main character as she gets really tied up into this seedy underbelly, and it was really fascinating. I didn't really know what to expect going into this book, but this was so fast-paced, high stakes from beginning to end, and I just thought it was like a lot of fun. It was very visual. I could clearly see all of the fight scenes and everything happening, and from start to finish I was entertained. I feel like this could be a good movie, and it honestly at times kind of feels like a movie script just in terms of the writing style of this book. So I had a lot of fun, fast-paced, really fun crime thriller. So with the completion of that book, we are moving on to the third and final book in this vlog, and that would be Death Takes Me by Cristina Rivera Garza. This is translated by Robin Myers and Sarah Booker. The tagline for this one is, "A city is always a cemetery." A professor named Cristina Rivera Garza stumbles upon the corpse of a mutilated man in a dark alley and reports it to the police. The professor becomes an informant on the case. So I'm very intrigued. We've got that meta sort of element where the author is the main character in this one. So I'm gonna go get to reading. I'm really excited for this one. I just feel like it's going to be, I feel like the meta-ness of that sort of storytelling style tends to really work for me. So very excited to dive into this third and final book for the vlog. I'm gonna go get to reading, and I will check back in later. So I am now at 35% of the way into Death Takes Me, and this is such an interesting reading experience. This one, I will admit, I first tried to listen to the audiobook. Like, I tried to start it listening to the audiobook when I was doing other things, and I got like a minute in and realized, no, this is a physical read. And then I switched to the physical. I restarted it, started reading it physically, and I was like, I think I could benefit from listening to it alongside the audiobook, because this one, in a word, very experimental. The way that this is told, the style of storytelling, and the prose and the narrative and all of that, it's very experimental. It kind of feels like you're reading this book in a dream, and then you wake up and you have to describe it to someone. Like, that's what it feels like. The cover for this one is actually, I think, really apt and really cool. It's a photo of a woman. I think it's a woman. Maybe I'm wrong, actually. It's a photo of a person, and they're just standing, and they have like a veil covering their face. And I think that imagery and that description of just like a veil covering something or obscuring something, making something a little bit hazy, is this reading experience for me. I like listening to this alongside the audiobook because we have gotten several perspective changes and changes in character we're following and character narration, and that's not like notated in the text. And each time that happens, I have been able to pick up on it, but not immediately all of the time. So the audiobook has multiple narrators, and it's helping with that, and it's really just also helping me absorb this story just with the way it's told. It feels like poetry in a lot of ways, very lyrical. And this one, I am worried that there is something significant that's lost in translation with this one. Not saying that the translators aren't doing a great job, because they are. I've read other things that are translated actually by both of these translators, but I just feel like sometimes when I'm reading this one, because this deals so heavily with wordplay and exploring connotations of words and words that have maybe multiple meanings, I just feel like something is is being lost in this English translation, and that is kind of a bummer. And I mean, it's something that I knew going into this book because part of the blurb and the tagline for this one is it's talking about, in Spanish, the word victim is always feminine. So because victim doesn't have a gender in English, that's already lost. But that's something I know from the book's dust jacket that it's going to be talking about. I feel like there are other things like that, like wordplay and different words that have different genders in Spanish that I'm just missing because I'm reading it in English. So the combination of that I just feel like I'm missing little small things that are important to the story, plus the way that this is being told in a very experimental way. This is like a struggle, not a bad struggle, but I feel like I really have to lock in. Not that I don't pay attention when I read other books, but like this one is one where I'm just so glad that I was able to check out the audiobook and listen to the audiobook and read along with it, because I think the immersion read is really helping me enjoy this book a lot more. I feel like I could not listen to this one on audio and absorb the story, and even just reading it physically on my own, I feel like I would kind of miss out on the phrasing and the sentence structure of some of these things. The narrators are reading them in a different way than I would read it in my head, in my own internal monologue. So that's been interesting. But we are following a variety of characters, but we are starting at the beginning of this book with the main character, Cristina Rivera Garza, and she is taking a jog and she stumbles upon a body, and this body is a man who has been castrated before he's been killed. And this is just one man in a series of murders that is happening in this town. There's also a poem that is written and placed with the body from a poet, and that's another thing. This poet, I am not familiar with her work. I feel like if I was, that I might be getting more out of it. The poet is Alejandra Pizarnik, and it says that she's one of the most emblematic figures of Hispanic literature, and I have never heard of this poet. So I think this is a poet that has a lot more name recognition in places that do speak Spanish. So that's another thing. But our main character is a professor of poetry. So because she stumbled upon this body and because she can like parse the poetry and figure out like what the poetry means, what the greater meaning is, the detective actually brings her along in the investigation as an informant to help her figure out this series of crimes. We also get letters from the perpetrator writing to Cristina Rivera Garza, and they have like a back and forth as the person who is doing these things is talking to the poet and trying to make a connection and explain not exactly like why they've done what they've done, but just some interesting conversations. So we get letters from that perspective. We get Cristina Rivera Garza as she is just a professor that is being pulled into this murder investigation, and we're also following the detective as she is trying to stop this series of murders, and she's talking about this series of murders that they have been emasculated twice. Once because they have been they've been mutilated, their bodies have, but then in the reporting of all of these events, the word for victim is feminine, so the wording of that makes them emasculated as well. So this is definitely a very interesting mystery, and just I am enjoying it. I think it's a beautifully written book. I'm really worried that I am just missing stuff in translation. So I don't know, this is definitely a very interesting reading experience. I did take a quick look on Storygraph, and it does look like this is a generalization. Obviously there are outliers, but the average rating of people who are at least writing their reviews in English is lower than the average rating of people who are writing their reviews in Spanish. And I would assume that the people that are writing their reviews in Spanish read this book in Spanish. So I do fear that I'm just missing out on things that are important to this story, but this is just told so poetically and so beautifully that I'm very interested in the things that it has to say. I wouldn't call this a thriller. This is a very, very literary mystery that we're just exploring just the differences between words and how we talk about victims and crimes, and how because all of these victims are men, it's kind of subverting what we usually think of when we think of victims and victimhood. So this is a very engaging read. It's probably going to take me a little bit to get through just so I can read it really slowly and really absorb all of the information, but hesitantly, I'm having a good time with this one. I'm really enjoying the prose, so I'm gonna get back to it and I will check back in with y'all later. So I finished Death Takes Me, and this did take me a little bit longer than it would typically would for me to read a book of this length. This book was just under 300 pages at 290 pages, so usually that would take me about 2 days to read. This one took me quite a bit longer because I wanted to be in the exact right mood for reading this one. This feels like a book that you should read with a book club and just have other people dissecting it with you, and it honestly also kind of feels like a book that is perfect for a class discussion. Even just reading it in a class and like taking some sort of literature course and having this be one of the texts that you are examining throughout a whole entire semester, that makes a lot of sense because the author is a poetry professor. Let me just make sure that I have her exact credentials correctly. She's the Hugh Roy and Lily Krantz Colon Distinguished Chair and Director of the PhD program in Creative Writing in Spanish at the University of Houston. So this definitely feels like a book that is designed to be dissected, and I think that is the point of this book. And even looking at the terminology that I was just using, saying dissecting, this feels like an autopsy of language, just as it is a mystery about a series of men who were murdered. So I really appreciated that. I will say I probably would have appreciated this more had I known like all of the work and authors and poets and artists that were referenced in here. Just my knowledge of those specific references I just didn't have. So unfortunately, a lot of those connections kind of went over my head, but this is such a beautiful, beautiful piece of writing. I really enjoyed just really focusing and really reading every single line. There is not a sentence in here that is not so deliberately crafted. So every single section of this was just something completely new. We had lots of perspective changes and tense changes. There was a section in here that read like a non-fiction about Pizarnik's writing and poetry, and then there was another section that was all through letters, and then there was another section that was written in poetry, and the commentary of prose and prose poetry was just really, really stunning. So while I appreciated all of that, this was not a reading experience that I really like enjoyed, if that makes sense. I really appreciated what this had to say. I think this did such an excellent job in taking the audience's expectations and twisting them. There's a blurb on the back of this by Yuri Herrera that says, Cristina Rivera Garza does not respect what is expected of a writer of a novel of language. She is an agitator. And I think that's a really good description for what this is. It was very intentionally frustrating at times and vague and obscure, and it definitely, my library has this marked as a thriller, and I think it was really promoted as a mystery and a thriller. And I think if you're going in expecting like a detective thriller, you're gonna be really disappointed because that's not what what this is. This is more of an autopsy and an examination and a dissection of language and poetry than it is like a cat and mouse detective and murderer game. So I don't know, really complex thoughts about this one. It wasn't a fun reading experience. It did feel like work, but I can respect, like, I can definitely see how this is such a great book and a great piece of literature that could absolutely be studied and taught in a classroom. That's not necessarily what I'm looking for every single time when I am picking up a book for enjoyment, for entertainment, but I definitely have never read a book quite like this one. So it was really interesting. Not what I thought, especially for this vlog when I was trying to pick mystery and thrillers, because I was in a mystery and thriller mood. But that leads us to the end of this vlog. I read 3 very different books for this one. My least favorite was Mask of the Deer Woman by Laurie Dove. I just really did not like the main character, and there were just some things with the plotting and the way that this book went that I didn't love. However, the writing style was one where I would check out something else by this author again. I'll definitely give her another shot, another chance later in the future if she comes out with another book. Just the plotting and the main character were just misses for me for this one. And then the other 2 are really hard to rate like my favorite of them because they were so vastly different. The Night of Baba Yaga, this one I read in a couple of hours. And I would say, just in terms of the focus of this vlog, which would be to be reading thrillers and mysteries, and when you talk about these genres you kind of have expectations of what a book is going to read like, I think this one reads the most traditional thrillery, feels very action-packed, and it's very speedy, short chapters. We have a lot of action and twists and turns happening, so I did like this one. I thought it was a lot of fun. If you are someone who likes a very fast-paced ride and some action scenes that you really can see in your mind's eye, I think this would be a great thriller to pick up. That was by Akira Otani, translated by Sam Bett. And then if you are looking for a mystery that also just really dives into literary criticism, this one I feel like if you are a literary fiction person or you are looking for a book, like you're craving, you are missing the college experience or the school experience, you want a book that you can spend weeks with and just really dive into every single sentence, look up every single mention of other pieces of art, and really piece this book together. Death Takes Me by Cristina Rivera Garza, and it's translated by Robin Meyer's Sarah Booker. I thought this one was definitely an interesting read. It was not what I expected going in, but I think if you go in with the right expectations and know this is one where you're not going to want to, like The Night of Baba Yaga, which was a fun read, like you can't read it in an afternoon, even if you can physically read it in an afternoon. Like I could sit down at the beginning of this day and, because it's short, power through and read it in a day, but this book really demands to be taken its time with, and for you to really uncover what it is trying to say and parse over that. This would be a great book club book if you are a member of a book club that likes literary fiction and likes like complicated books. I think this would be a really good book for that, because it's a book that definitely brokers discussion. But that is it for this vlog. Definitely had an interesting time reading these thriller and mystery books. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any content from me. Stay safe, stay spooky, and I will see y'all in the next video. Bye!